Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Aachen, the founder of Chop Local. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at choplocaluniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Before we get into this next episode, I wanted to let you know about one of our other resources that we offer. If you are in a hurry to see meat marketing results fast, then the Meat Commerce Essentials course is perfect for you. It covers everything that you need to know to sell meat online successfully, and it's presented in short video snippets to get you the info that you need to put into action as quickly as possible. For a limited time, we're offering our podcast listeners $100 off the course using coupon code POD100. That's POD100. Just visit choplocaluniversity.com to find the course and be sure to enter POD100 at checkout. Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Olthoff, the co-founder of Chop Local and Chop Local University. And, we've been doing a lot of interviews with farmers and ranchers selling direct to consumer. And today, my guest is one of those farmers, ranchers selling beef direct to consumer and also through wholesale channels. But he's also developed software to help other farmers and ranchers and meat processors keep track of all of their records and things like that. He's going to get a lot more into it. So joining me today is Tom Richards. Thanks, Tom, for joining me.
Thank you, Katie, for having me. Happy to be here.
So, Tom, let's start out. Give everybody a little bit of background about Richards Regenerative Meat and kind of your family's journey into selling beef direct to consumer, and then we'll get into the software.
So our journey starts actually way before me. So our family's been in agriculture and food processing and ranching for decades. And my great-grandfather bought our ranch property where I'm at today in 1941. And so we've been raising cattle in here and leasing cattle ground for, I guess, 85 years now. So that's kind of the beginning of everything, if you will. And then our journey in creating the software started about 12 years ago when we just decided the cattle market was kind of in a flux, but in the other direction as opposed to today where it's really high. It was really low. And we really didn't know what we were going to do with our business. And so we decided to make it more complex by starting a beef company.
Yeah. And isn't that the truth? So many farmers and ranchers think, well, how hard can it be to sell my beef direct to consumer instead of taking it to the sale barn or something like that? And you guys are in, I don't think you said this yet, but you're in kind of Northern California in the foothills of the mountains. Am I correct? And so you've got obviously a huge population on the West Coast that might be interested in your beef. I'm guessing you thought the same thing. Can't be that hard, right? We'll start selling it direct to consumer.
Yeah, we really didn't know what we didn't know. And so we kind of jumped in very, very ambitious and enthusiastic and started like most people do, selling halves and wholes and quarters. As I think a lot of people have experienced, that in the beginning, it's really easy and pretty quick to sell out, right? Because you don't have your supply down, all that kind of stuff. So we grew pretty quickly, and very quickly we also realized that we needed to track a lot of data initially around the animals, because we went out and got a American Grass-Fed Association certification. So they were coming to us saying, we need the data on your animals and all this kind of stuff. And it was funny when we went back to the family and our ranch manager at the time and was asking them, okay, how many animals do we have? And we basically got in a giant argument about how many cows we had.
Because you didn't know how many cows had a different number, huh?
Right? Exactly. It wasn't even really tracked on paper. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. And it was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
small, notepad in my grandpa or my dad's pocket. And so, my background, which I didn't really talk about when I graduated college, the cattle market was still kind of, bad. And so I didn't really go into ag and I went into technology. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about that a little bit more. But essentially, when this whole argument came up around how many cows we had, I said, you know what? I'm working in technology. I kind of know a little bit about tracking this kind of data.
Yep.
Let me take a crack at this and see if we can come up with something to manage all this. And
Sure.
that was really the moment when we embarked on creating all of this.
Yeah. Well, let's give a little bit of an overview of the kind of as it is right now. The software is called HarvestPath. But there are kind of three separate portions of it. And the first one is called Animal Path and is really for animal tracking. So, like you were talking about, literally, how many cows do I have out there? But you and I have also talked about things like what is the birth weight of their calves and who is it bred to and what vaccinations has it had and what medical issues. You can track all of that sort of thing with Animal Path, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I was going to say the other thing, you can track all those animal health records, but you're also tracking your costs. And that's one thing that I think I just went to the Grassworks conference in Wisconsin, and some of our listeners heard me talk a little bit about that. But that was one of the speakers was talking about how difficult it is, especially for cattle producers, to track all of their costs. And your animal path portion of the software helps you do that for your production side of the business, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So, as I mentioned, it started over an argument, right? We quickly realized that it's not just about how many you have and what types and
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things, but it was really our ability to answer the question, how much money do we really have in these cows? And what does that look like in terms of feed and labor and vaccines and vet bills and all the different things? And so when we built our original version, we were tracking a lot of this stuff at a high level. We were tracking vaccines and we were tracking the costs and feed. But in the new version that we've created now, we've taken that a step further. And what we did is we created this thing we call a ledger, just like a financial ledger. We created an animal ledger. And what happens is oftentimes when you're working cattle, you're working them as in groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're preg checking or you're moving them or you're separating your yearlings from
Mm-hmm.
the moms and all these kinds of things. So all of that work gets done at a group level. And what we
Right.
realized is that it's one thing to track it at a group level, like you have one vet bill, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you apply all of that vet bill for preg checking across 49 mother cows? So we created this concept called an animal ledger. So we can enter that data, vet bill of this and extra labor of that, for preg checking. And then it asks you a question of, do you want to track that at a high level or you want to split between the animals? And you can do that and it applies it to the individual animal ledger.
Very cool.
That ledger follows the animal. So when that animal is sold as an animal or if it goes into processing, you know what that animal cost you.
So is that a good segue into the next portion of the software, the production path, which, like you said, you've got these records for the animal. Now that animal is being transformed or being sold in your case or in the case of a lot of our listeners, direct to consumer, they're taking it to a processor. You've got your cost of production so far. You're going to have additional costs and more data points that are coming from your processor, right? And so that's that next portion of the software.
Yeah, so production path, we broke actually into three pieces. And one is the slaughter piece. And then the second piece is what we call the primal lot
Mhm.
piece, where you've got box beef. And then
Mhm.
the third section is finished goods. And you can use different pieces of this, but it's set up so that it will really track the whole process. What we do is we bring that animal or a group of animals or a truckload or what have you into the harvest process. We bring the cost of that animal and the haul and all the other stuff. And that's kind of where it starts. And then we're able to add the USDA fees, line change fees, the kill fee, and all the different fees to that, to where we get a carcass cost, right? And then we kind of snap the chalk line at that point. And it's like, okay, we've done our slaughter, we've transported, and now we have this many carcasses, and here's our cost. And then it takes another step, which is I want to apply a cut sheet to that. And then I want to move to a primal box beef step. And so then in that next step, we start to grab those additional costs of, I have the cut and wrap fee, and you just add up those different fees associated with the, creation of primal inventory.
Okay.
And then we snap the chalk line again. And so you can look at your costs of carcass, costs of primals, and then we go through a final step of fabrication, where you add labels and processing and the cryovac packaging and all that stuff to get to a finished good. So that's kind of the whole process that we manage in the production path side.
So I can see this being used for, obviously, like ranches like yours where they're raising the animals and then they're taking them to processing. We work with some butcher shops that are either buying live animals and then having them processed, or maybe they are buying primals. It sounds to me like they could jump in to HarvestPath software at whatever point they're at in the supply chain and use the portions that make sense for them, but still going to get really good data, get good information that's going to help them figure out their cost of production or their cost of goods sold to inform decision making, inform pricing, things like that, right?
That's absolutely true. In fact, I was just talking to a butcher shop today. And so you can absolutely use it where you're doing custom processing for somebody else, right? So we enable it so that you, like as a butcher, you can bring it in as a harvest, right? As an animal that was provided by, like, Henderson Land and Cattle.
Yeah.
And it's on behalf of Joe Smith, who's buying a half, right?
Okay.
And we enable you to split the carcasses and all these kinds of things and assign them to the individual so that the butcher shop knows which tag number and which half belongs to what customer, and so
Okay.
on.
So I've heard of other, what I consider cut sheet software programs, where if you're selling custom exempt, for example, or I mean, even if it's a butcher shop that needs to get a cut sheet from a farmer, either way, if the shop needs to get a cut sheet, a software program that allows them to fill out the cut sheet online and then submit it, and then it gives the cutting instructions to the staff. Does your software do that too, or is it kind of a different purpose?
Yeah, so we do manage cut sheets in the system. We're utilizing a platform called the Salesforce platform.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, we get a capability out of the box that they call communities.
Okay.
So basically we can take it's basically a portal, for
Mm-hmm.
lack, they just call it a community.
Yeah.
So we can take those portals and we can enable the visibility of an order or visibility of a cut sheet so that you can turn around and open that up to the customer, and they can go online and they can either view it or make adjustments to it. That even can be where they submit their order or pay their order and all these kinds of things. So there's definitely a capability that enables, or that can enable that.
Yep. Okay, cool. Good to know. That was one thing. You and I have had a few conversations and we hadn't really talked about that. So I was curious about that piece of it. So is there anything else in the production path that kind of high level that we need to cover, or should we move on to that last bit, which is called the protein path?
I'll add something here that is kind of a segue into the protein path. And that is that what we realized is that this is a really long supply chain, and that when you're jumping into this as a cattle producer, right, you're basically jumping into this huge supply chain, whereas before you were just selling animals.
Right.
And so what we realized is that all along this chain, you can sell different things, right?
Mhm.
You might have to sell an animal that you want to get rid of for
Mhm.
whatever, or a group of animals. You might want to sell a carcass to a butcher shop and they do their own stuff, right?
Mhm.
Might want to sell boxed beef during,
Mhm.
at some point. And then you might also be taking everything to the final step and selling finished goods. What we've
Mhm.
enabled, because we're on the Salesforce platform, which is essentially a CRM platform, we
Explain that
enable,
to our listeners. What's a CRM?
yeah, so that is what they call customer relationship management. And
You know
so
what
the
I was thinking earlier? In this
what?
case, especially in the animal path, it's cow relationship management instead. Okay. It's
Yeah,
like I was thinking each cow is your customer, right? And you're keeping these records and then you're dividing out that sort of thing. I want you to use that. I want you to use
I'm going
cow
to use
relationship manager and just always credit back Katie Olthoff Chop Local for that. Okay.
right. I'm going to use that, and I think that's
Yeah.
a good one. So because that's the platform that we built this on,
Hmm.
we have CRM that's embedded through the whole thing.
Hmm.
So at any point, whatever you need to sell, we're enabling the creation of those products and inventory items as you go, and the order mechanism to sell it. And so that's a good segue into Protein Path. It's all essentially one software system, and
Hmm.
we just license it in pieces. And
Hmm.
so Protein Path is a piece that is really for that CRM. So it's the account management, contact management, activities and calendar, and then sales,
Hmm.
orders, products, and inventory. And how do you pull all that together for a sale?
You integrate with Shopify, so it could be direct to consumer sales individually, but it could also be like, one thing I encourage producers to do is if they sell a half a beef, they need to find out how long does it take that customer to go through a half a beef, and then 6 months later, they need to contact them again. And I assume that that's part, that can kind of work. That's how a CRM helps remind you who to follow up on and things like that. Is that part of what's involved in here too?
Yeah, the system is set up to help you manage all the different aspects of communicating with your customers, whether
Hmm.
that be just the sales. There's automated emails and templates, and there's workflow behind that too. So, when you receive an order, you can automate the templated, hey, we received your order, please confirm that this is what you want. And so there's a
Mm.
lot of those things that we get out of the box because we're
Hmm.
using the Salesforce platform. And then other things that they call like flows, and they're like automations that you can do in the background that
Yep.
just speed things up and automate certain tasks. So there's a lot of those things that you would see in sophisticated CRMs that are a part of HarvestPath because
That's really cool.
yeah, no, it's
It's
great.
really cool because one of those pain points that I hear from farmers is that, selling quarters and halves is great from not having to manage carcass inventory and things like that, but requires a lot of communication with customers. And it sounds like, I hear about people who are like, I get a Facebook message and I get a text message, and it's like you said, it's written on the back of a receipt that I shoved in my pocket in the truck, or I shoved in the cup holder in the truck. And so you can bring it all in here to the software and have it in one place where everybody can look back and say, okay, if we have 6 head we're harvesting in March, yes, here are the 12 customers that each bought a half or whatever that might be. So I like that.
The other advantage too is, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but it's mobile.
Mm,
So
yeah.
animal path, production path, protein path, they're all mobile. So the
Yep.
whole application. So you're on the road, a customer calls you, they want to know what's going on with an order or what's going on with a harvest, or
Yep.
you can see it all when you're on the road too.
That's so handy. So handy. You and I have talked a few times and we've talked about different points in the supply chain that people might use this, but we've also talked about the benefits. For example, you said you had a client that was getting a line of credit from the bank or getting a loan from the bank. The bank wanted data about, I think it was the cattle that they had on the ground and that sort of thing. Or they could have it straight there from the HarvestPath software, right?
Yeah, and it's across the board. So it's not just the cattle assets that you
Mm-hmm.
have and your ability to track those and locate them, but also inventory assets. So
Mm-hmm.
what is your on-hand inventory? And then even deeper than that, it's your margin.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your margin by product? And then a lot of times bankers will ask, how many customers do you have? How much of your business is with each customer, right? Because they're checking to make sure you don't have one customer, and if you lose it, you're toast. So there's all those kinds of questions, and the Path tracks all of that. So you really have one system. I know for us in particular, when it came time to get loans and all of those questions came, we actually gave the bankers a demo of the system.
Yeah.
And we said, what do you want? And they were flabbergasted because they were like, wow, you guys really have a handle on all your data. I don't know if that's the only thing, but I know that that's enabled us to have some pretty good banking relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I am not the business manager on my farm, nor am I in the Chop Local business. I have my husband takes care of the business stuff on the farm, and my business partner takes care of it for Chop Local. But I do know that when you walk into the bank, they want you to have numbers. They don't want you to walk in completely blind and make them figure it all out for you. And so like you said, it makes that banking relationship so much better, which can be really important, especially in a long production cycle like a cattle operation. Now, I don't think we've talked other species on can we handle other species in this software?
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, right now, out of the box, any four-legged species.
Okay.
So we have customers doing cattle, hogs, bison, and elk. But goats or sheep. We have several folks we're talking to about lamb and sheep. And then we actually have a lot of people. We have four different companies that are chicken
Yeah.
producers. We're talking with several right now, and there's just some small tweaks we need to make.
Yep.
Um,
Sure.
and it really has to do with managing bins instead of carcasses, and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
right. And so it's just some of these small changes, which I think we're going to do, um,
Hmm.
but we just haven't done it yet. So yeah, it
But
is
you
multi.
told me that now that you've built what you need for your ranch, the next steps are as a customer comes to you and says, hey, you don't have a field for me to, you don't have a place for me to track in the software, what kind of patterns are on my calves' faces from each. I gave that example because we have mini Herefords. We have one cow that has these calves that have this beautiful dark spot around their eyes, which is really desirable in the registered mini Hereford world, apparently. And so, if we had a large herd, which we don't, but if we did, that would be a great way for us to track this. But I'm guessing you don't have a spot right now that says, does it have a brown patch around its eye, right? But you could add that for us.
Right. That's again a thing or a feature that we get in using their platform is it's configurable not just by us, but when we enable a system or an instance
Mm-hmm.
for you, you get the tools that I have to add a custom field or create a formula or a report or a dashboard. All of those capabilities are now in your hands as a customer. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily have to rely on us. If you say, hey, I want to track, that field, and I
Mm-hmm.
think to myself, does everybody want that? Do I need to build that? And I kind of maybe I decide, no, we don't, but you want it. You can do
Right.
it.
Cool. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of another ranch that I know out in California that raises longhorns, and I know that the width or the length of the horns, I don't know how they describe it, like longer is better, that's more desirable. So I'm thinking about those types of attributes that might just apply to a specific farmer ranch that could be really interesting.
The one that
So,
I'll just mention this really quick. The one that's come up in my discussions with people is triplets for sheep.
that's right.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and that's just a checkbox that we can add in minutes.
Yeah, for sheep so that they can really maximize their herd growth that way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if somebody were to get started with this, there's a lot of data that is probably spread out right now or maybe hasn't been gathered. So what is your advice to producers who are just, they understand the need for record keeping and data management and they want to get a better handle on their cost of production? Where do they start? What's your advice for them?
Well, I that's kind of along the lines of like, how do you deploy the system, right?
Hmm.
And so the biggest things that people need to get their hands around, or where we often start, is, do you have all of your account and contact data in one place, right?
Hmm.
Or are you able to get it into a spreadsheet so that we can upload it? Second thing is your product information. Do you have formal product codes and details and descriptions and specs? And so we oftentimes like tell people you need to have that stuff together.
Hmm.
Then the other thing is prices, or a price book. Do you
Hmm.
have that set up in a spreadsheet or somewhere that you're formally managing it? And then the last and final piece is inventory. So do
Hmm.
you have inventory records, and are they, a lot of times, a lot of these things, the easiest way to get them into our system is through a spreadsheet, and then
Hmm.
we just upload it. And
Hmm.
so those are the things that a lot of what we start with when we implement somebody is like, this is the data we need you to go assemble. And then we look at it with them and we add things or take things out or whatever. We start uploading that data. But it's really getting a handle on those things as much as you can in Excel,
Hmm.
or whatever tool you're using prior.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, like, I had one farmer that told me the other day that he's got 5 different spreadsheets he's using to manage things right now. So, chances are he's probably got some of this information. It's just disjointed, and the spreadsheets aren't talking to each other the way that we'd like them to, right? But sounds like we could take those spreadsheets, upload them into the HarvestPath system, get everything linked that manage that cow relationship all the way from cow or calf to carcass to the cuts that are going out to a buyer, right?
exactly. Yep. Yeah, spreadsheets, it's the way that ag moves these days, right? Is a lot with spreadsheets, but
Hmm.
and so yeah, as long as you can get that stuff into that format, we can take care of it from there.
Cool. And you said another time that we talked, you advise people don't feel like you have to sit down and enter every data point possible in one sitting, right? You can start small with maybe you're starting, I would have thought maybe you start with the cow and the calf, but you're saying you almost start at the end of the supply chain if you're part of the whole thing, but just start small and then add more data as you go.
Yeah, well, it just depends. It depends on your goals as a
Yeah.
company. And you don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily want to get bigger,
Mm-hmm.
right? Our system could be something that you could use, but it may be overkill, just depending on what your goals are. Our goals when we started to create this, we wanted to grow the company. We wanted to be, at 500 to 1,000 head and that kind of thing. And so if you know that that's where you're going, and you know that your inventory records and all this kind of stuff is only going to increase,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't really start too early to start getting that under control, because then you're not waiting to scale. You're not like, oh, okay, we're ready to scale, but now we got to get a system in place. And so that's going to take time. And so we got to wait. If you know that's where you're headed, then anytime's a good time to start getting your data managed, you know, professionally.
And I just think you would have such a much better idea of thinking, okay, let's say we have 200 cows right now, and each one of them is costing us this amount. And if we wanted to double that to 400, we're going to need a line of credit, or we're going to need a loan, or we're going to need X, Y, or Z, right? And you've got that information that helps you make those projections.
That is exactly correct. And we're part of the system too, is you can create cattle purchase records, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
or harvest records, right? Or planning
Mm-hmm.
records. So what's
Mm-hmm.
nice is they have a status. And so you can create records for an entire year that basically create your plan. So for instance, right, you would say, okay, for every month, we're going to do a truckload of animals and we're going to do, so that's 33. And then you create one for January, clone it for February, clone it for March. And then you could go in and say, well, I think cattle prices are going to go up in the latter part of the year. So I'm going to adjust the prices on the out years. And you can put a whole annual plan together with what I'm going to buy them for, what I'm going to ship them for, and all the costs, including things like death loss or transport or cost of capital and all those kinds of things. We enable that planning as well.
It's so cool. I keep saying I'm not the business person, but I do love data. And so it'd be so interesting to sit and look at like things like just deciding which cows to cull and things like that, which ones are costing us the most. Oh, I didn't realize that she keeps getting sick and we keep having to treat her, or that her calves keep, having issues or things like that. Be fascinating. So,
yeah, we call it the injured reserve report, right?
mm,
Right. So it's like,
yep.
it's like in sports, right? My daughter's a collegiate athlete. So I use these sports analogies all the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
you have ones that always lose their calves, or they're sick all the time, or they get
Yep.
pink eye, or
Right.
you can
Yep.
track all that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to keep learning more about the software. We're kind of recording this podcast and it's going to be published tomorrow, actually. So everybody's going to be able to listen. We're recording it on Wednesday, February 11th. You're all going to be hearing it on Thursday, February 12th. So quick turnaround. But Tom and I are also going to sit with a few producers and go through this software and see what it might look like on their operations. And I'm excited about that. But if our listeners who were not invited to those demonstrations want to get some more information, they can visit you at harvestpath.ai, and there's a little form to fill out there. Right.
That's right.
Is there anything else that we missed that you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say, so people know that I'm in the industry too. We have a ranch, we have a beef company, and that's called Richard's Regenerative. And so you can look that up and learn a little bit about our operation as well. And that was the kind of founding or impetus of creating the software. We still use it today. We were customer number one. And then also what I'm finding as well is that we're starting to do consulting. And a lot of times it's around pricing, bundling, packaging, things like that, that's coming up. And then how to track those things, how to manage reports, and also things around inventory management and all these kinds of things. So I would say that customers who maybe think they aren't ready, we can also work with them on a consulting basis to like do an assessment, and then also tell them the things that they would need to do to get ready and help them kind of plan for their future success.
Yeah. I love that, Tom. I love that you guys have taken what you have learned on the ground through Richard's Regenerative and your experience in business and building this software and truly using it to help other direct to consumer farmers, small meat processors, everybody that's in kind of this alternative meat supply chain have success. We obviously at Chop Local believe in collaborating for the greater good of the alternative meat supply chain. And there are some people that would say, why would Richard's Regenerative want to improve the success rate of their competitors? But, there's a lot of Americans that are eating meat from Walmart every day. And there's a lot of producers out there that could supply them with something different. And I love that you're helping them do that successfully.
Yeah. And I thank you. I appreciate that. I think as somebody who grew up in an ag family, I've watched many communities up here by our ranch, and then our extended family is in ranching too, like my cousin and the towns around them, like up in Modoc County, which is way northern California. They've all been kind of destroyed and gutted. And I think that part of this movement, to your point, and like what you guys do at Chop Local, is really empowering agriculture again, right? And to make it something that people want to, get out of college and go do. And
Right.
and making it an industry that's exciting. And so I think there's definitely a lot of work to do.
There
But
is. I agree. But we're, same again, like Chop Local, using technology to make it easier for everybody. I think that there are great opportunities right now in this business. So
yeah, I
thanks.
agree 100%.
Thanks again, Tom, for joining me. We'll send people over to harvestpath.ai to learn a little bit more. And like you said, they can check out Richard's Regenerative as well.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to choplocaluniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.